Jane. Welcome to Season 3 of Decoding with WINFO. We are so excited to bring our next couple guests for you this season. To start us off, I am welcoming Roshni today. Hi Roshni, we're so excited to have you on Decoding with WINFO. Can you give us a little quick intro about you, who you are, what you do now, and what you studied at UW?
Hi everyone, I'm Roshni. I studied informatics at UW and I graduated the summer of 2024. And now I'm a software engineer at Amazon.
Awesome. Can you walk us through a little bit about your journey getting to UW, how you kind of made the decision to study informatics, how it led you to where you are right now?
Yeah, so I am from the area, so UW was always kind of like, the college that everyone goes to. But I was also like introduced to like programming at a really young age. I first started learning how to code when I was in like 3rd grade, and then since then I like kind of took more classes, did summer camps, all of those things. So I had a very like, I would say, solid like foundation in programming. And then when it came time to starting college apps, I realized that I actually really hated the idea of going into computer science particularly. I'm not much of like a person who does a lot of theory. I don't love math. And I knew I wanted to do something that was kind of tech related, but not necessarily tech, or not necessarily computer science. And so what I did was actually like the day before like the UW apps were due, I like was just poking around the website and I found the like I am the informatics page, and I like was reading a few of the profiles and I saw a couple that were really interesting, and I was like, hey wait, this is really similar to like CS, like the career projections are the same, but it seems a lot more chill and it seems a lot more like something that I would want to do. And so like last minute I changed my decision from like CS direct admit to informatics direct admit. Luckily I did get in, so I didn't have to apply again, and then that was like kind of a done decision like since then.
Yeah. You've done so much throughout your time at UW, from being Husky 100 to co-leading WINFO. How would you describe your journey in a couple words?
In a couple words, I would say exciting, because I did like find a lot of what I did like really exciting and interesting to me. I would also say it was like empathetic in a way, because info teaches you how to be really empathetic towards people, like as like a just it's kind of like the framework that they teach you to approach everything with. And last, I would say like fun. Like I just like had a lot of fun throughout my time at college, and I kind of it took me a while to like learn how to relax, but once I finally did, I felt like I made a better use of my time at UW.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Moving on to kind of your current career and your software engineering side of school. You're now a software developer at Amazon on the CloudFront Compute/Frontier team. Can you tell us a little bit more about your day-to-day and what it looks like?
Yeah. So first, CloudFront Compute/Frontier is a very like niche like name within Amazon. Like a lot of people, like if you say like I'm a software engineer, they know what that means. Or if they say I work on a website, they know what that means. But for compute, one thing I will say is that even within Amazon, nobody knows what that means. So essentially what our team does is we work on these things called POPs, which are small little, you can think of them as servers that are all around the world. And they send internet requests from one place to the other, and eventually they reach a customer. So my team specifically works on making those requests go a little bit faster. And by a little bit faster, it's like a couple of milliseconds, like here and there. But like when you add them up, it like I think compute brings in like $15 million like revenue towards Amazon. So it's like a very like small team. Mm-hmm. But it like has a lot of impact. As for what I do day to day, as a software engineer, mostly like work on different like services. So Compute team has like a few different services, and we manage them like end to end. And as a developer, what I do is like, let's say there's a bug with something or we're building a new feature, I like take different action items and I actually like work on them until they're finished, and then I also like monitor them as they're being like rolled out to make sure that it keeps working. So an example of that would be like we have this new like feature that we're developing and I'm writing an API for that. So customers are going to be able to like say get or list or read or write things like that. Like a day in the life, mostly, I just go to work, I attend my meetings, and then I go back home. Luckily, as a software engineer, I don't have to attend too many meetings. That's what managers are for. And so that's something that I really appreciate because I don't like meetings.
How did your time at the UW Information School kind of translate and help you transition from being a student to working full-time in big tech? You mentioned meetings and working with a team. I know the informatics school values teamwork and collaboration. How did that kind of translate into your day-to-day today?
Yeah, that is a really big part of like my day-to-day life. I had a really big gap after I graduated and before I started my job. So I graduated in March technically, and then I started in August. So I had like a good like 6 months where I was just sitting at home doing nothing. And I feel like it was nice to have that relaxation, but once I started work again, it felt like a really big shift from doing nothing all day to like working 9 to 5 every single day. But I think info has really helped me because it taught me that like first you do have to work with your team members. Even though software development is like on its own pretty individual, I do interact with my team members every day. Info also teaches you that it's okay to not know the answer to things, and a lot of the times I don't know the answer to things, so I have to be okay with asking my coworkers and going from there. Also, I think looking at systems as a whole, Amazon has a lot of code and a lot of different people writing that code, so their design systems are not necessarily consistent from one place to the other. And so with info, if you're looking at a system as a whole, you can kind of use the frameworks to say okay, this is one part of the system, this is another part of the system. They may not look the same, but they're still interacting in some way, and looking at everything together rather than individual parts of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as far as your technical education from UW, were there any particular classes that you think really, affirmed that you wanted to continue software developing, or kind of really helped you get your first interview, whether that be for internships or your full-time role?
Yeah, so for software engineering, I will say taking the data structure series, really important. So the 1-2x series, taking any kind of data structures class will really help you with interviews, because that is what interviews are. I've even looked at the interview guides for Amazon, and it is all based off of whether you can see a data structure and understand how it works. They don't even care if you get the question right. They just want to see if you can answer based off of the data structure. As for the actual development work, a lot of software development has nothing to do with data structures. I haven't used a queue at all. But what did help me in terms of info classes was 442, 441, and what else? Any kind of 442, 441, any design class where you're working on the project from end to end, those all really helped me. Yeah, I think having the projects at the end of the info class also really helped me with interviews, because you can talk about it to your interviewers and you can provide them links and they can see your work, which is, I think, a really good way to showcase your skills.
And then coming from a non kind of leading major such as computer science, as you mentioned, you have an informatics degree. How do you think that kind of played an advantage at Amazon or perhaps when you were interviewing?
That's a good question. I will say it didn't give me like a huge advantage when I was interviewing, because other than the projects are a huge advantage, but other than that, like when interviewers see the word informatics, a lot of times they don't understand what it is, and so you do have to like spend that time explaining it. But if you can explain it well, I think that will really give you like credit to your interviewer. As for work, I think informatics has helped me a lot because it is so application based, and you actually get real world experience using APIs, calling APIs, writing projects from scratch that a lot of CS majors don't really get until they reach their upper level classes, because they're so focused on like the theoretical stuff first. And so since info gives you that throughout your whole college experience, I feel like it is a really big advantage.
Awesome. Is there any project that you worked on recently that you can share that you're really excited about or proud of how it's gone?
So I'm still like a relatively new developer. Like I joined Amazon 6 months ago. So unfortunately, all they've been giving me is background projects. But I will say like they did recently put me on a more like customer facing project, but I can't really talk very much about it. But recently I just finished a project which was like updating like one of the tests that we use, like test on demand, so it runs like 900 tests or something like that. But the code hadn't been touched in like 8 years, and so the whole thing needed to be updated. And I just finished that. It did take me like 4 months to do everything, so I'm proud of that, but it is a backlog project, so it helps my team, but it's not necessarily customer focused.
Okay, moving on to the Woman in Tech and Representation side of our podcast. At Amazon and in the world of big tech, especially coming from UW where tech is already so heavy, how do you feel about the representation today? And we can move more into your time at WINFO, but today, how do you feel about it?
On my direct team, I'm one of 3 women, including myself. And then on my skip level team, so the team that's above me, there is 1 woman. And so it is like honestly very, very, very like male heavy. Like there's not a lot of like women in tech, at least in my direct vicinity. But and like sometimes that comes across like really like in terms of like my team like mostly talks about cars and video games like at lunch, and that's not like something that I am like particularly interested in, but that is just what the majority of the conversation tends to go towards. But there are resources at Amazon as well as at UW that are specifically geared towards women, and I feel like those are a lot more helpful, especially if you do take advantage of them. Like recently I went to like a panel where it was actually like it was a women at Amazon panel, but all of the panelists were male, talking about how they could be better allies to women at Amazon, which I thought was a really interesting way of doing things. I've never really seen that before, but there is a community at Amazon. You just have to search for it a little bit.
There's still a long journey ahead. Yeah. What advice do you have for marginalized folks or women that are looking to enter, and how should they navigate male-dominated spaces like the software engineering industry?
I think the biggest piece of advice is to not be afraid to take up space, because what ended up happening a lot during my first internship with Amazon was like I was so scared to ask questions. I had another like intern that was in my Teams cohort, and he was just asking questions right off the bat, like, you know, getting, like, insisting on people answering his questions, and he got a lot farther with his project than I did at first before I realized that, like, especially as a software developer, where a lot of your projects are like individual, nobody else really cares about what your project is doing unless you go and make them care about it. And so that means constantly asking them questions, like if they don't respond to you, following up. Like asking like 3 or 4 times isn't necessarily rude. Like it feels rude, but it isn't. You just have to do it anyway. Like obviously like still like be professional and polite, but you have to kind of take that initiative and not be afraid to like seem like you're like asking for too much.
Yeah. And then if you had to say something that you wish you knew before entering your first full-time engineering role, what would you say?
Something that I wish I knew was that it is not actually that different from school, especially when you're first starting out. Because when you're in school, you're kind of in the mindset of like learning, right? When you're at your job, you still have to learn. Like I spent like my first like 2 months like going home every single night and taking notes like about like our service and our features and our things that I'm supposed to know about, because like it's just so much information. But also like knowing that your team members are there to help you. Like I've wasted a lot of time like trying to figure out a problem by myself, where I could have just leaned over and asked the person sitting next to me, and they would probably know the answer a lot faster because they've been here for so much longer.
Yeah, it's great advice. I'm sure it'll be applicable to so many industries. Looking ahead, do you see yourself staying in software engineering long term, or are you curious about exploring different kinds of positions in tech? How do you see your journey progressing?
I think for me, I do want to stay in software engineering a little bit, at least for the next like 3 to 4 years. Maybe not necessarily at Amazon, but I do want to stay and explore like the different aspects of like technology. Right now, I'm a back-end developer primarily, but I do want to like go into front end maybe or full stack just to see what it's like. Long term, I don't know if I want to stay as a software engineer. I do want to explore like something that's really been interesting to me is sustainability, as well as like data science. And I think maybe like down the line, if I can find a job that is somewhat related to sustainability or data science, like I would like to explore that. But at the moment, since I'm still so early in my career, I think I need to like build a base in my software engineering skills before I can kind of transition to other industries.
And then you mentioned like moving from back end to front end. Does are there opportunities at Amazon for you to easily kind of try out new roles?
Yeah, actually, Amazon does have like a SDE job openings, like a Slack channel where you could like theoretically like apply to different roles like across the country, across the world, and it's internal only. So it's a great resource for like if you're trying to move teams within Amazon. It also happens like people move teams constantly. Like I met a guy who was on my team for like a month and then he left. So people move teams a lot, especially in a lot of like corporate organizations. Like reorgs are also super common. The day that I joined the compute team, we actually merged and became the compute frontier team. So like reorgs are super common, they happen all the time. Like people move around a lot. It's not something to be like, scared about. Like if your manager is a good manager, you should be able to talk to them about wanting to move teams without feeling the need of being like, oh, my manager will feel bad if I tell them that I don't want to be here anymore. No, your manager should support you and help you reach your goals.
What's one piece of advice you give to current informatics students that are looking to segue into the software engineering industry or potentially become software engineers?
I would say definitely like try new things and do side projects. I think a lot of the times like learning from the book is a good way to get you to the interview stage or through the interview stage, but when it actually comes to showing your skills, like your projects are going to be a lot more useful. So if you can take the time over a quarter to like build your own portfolio or like do something that interests you that isn't like necessarily class related, that's definitely going to be helpful in the long run.
Yeah, awesome. And then if you could go back and change one thing about your SWE learning journey, what would it be and why?
I think for me, I wouldn't necessarily change anything about like my SWE journey. I would tell myself to go back and relax a lot more in freshman year, because like I had that mentality coming into college of like, you know, I need to get good grades, I need to get a good job. I was very like, you know, one track minded, or like I had one pathway, and then it's like I didn't until like sophomore or junior year. I didn't like, that's when I started realizing like, okay, like I can calm down a little, I can take classes that interest me that are outside of like the CS or like any tech pathway. I took a minor in environmental science, because I think the biggest thing that I realized is that tech jobs or CS jobs in general will always have some sort of like intersectionality with another field.
Yeah.
Unless you're going into a FANG, which like some people want to do, but also like, do you really want to do it? But unless you're going into a FANG, a lot of tech jobs have some sort of intersectionality with another space. So if you can learn about other spaces, you will increase your opportunities to get these jobs because you have a different perspective.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. I know that so many students right now are feeling panicked or struggling with the dauntingness of the software engineering industry or just the tech world in general. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. And then to end it off, looking back at your time at UW, what advice would you give to your freshman year self? It could be anything non-academic.
Well, other than to relax, I think I also would tell myself to just try new things and also like trust yourself a little bit more. I spent a lot of time like second guessing whether I should or should not do something, and that time that it took me to make a decision, like by that time, like the decision was already made.
Yeah.
Kind of. So like trust your gut. Like you usually know what you're doing, especially if like college is also like the time for you to learn and make mistakes. So if you make a mistake in college, nobody really is gonna care about it. Like I have failed a test. Nobody asked me about that ever.
Yeah.
Like, so things like college is the time to make mistakes. So like embrace it, try new things. Like once you get out of college, like things become a little bit more like set in stone, but also not really. You have control over your own life. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's it for our episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was amazing to learn about your journey to the SWE industry, and also as a former WINFO officer, it's really nice to have you back here. So thank you all for listening. We will see you next time.